Jungkook stutters mid-podcast when asked a shocking question. TAEHYUNG cuts in, and JIMIN's explosive reaction flips the room into chaos. You still think about her, don't you? The question dropped like a match in a room soaked in gasoline. Jungkook's lips parted, but no sound came. The studio lights bore down on him, his throat constricting as his breath caught mid-exhale. The silence wasn't brief, it expanded, tense and sharp, like the seconds before a detonation. His fingers clenched around the edge of the table, knuckles white, a pulse thrumming visibly in his neck. The podcast was live. The world was listening. The host, a silver-tongued provocateur named Reina, leaned in slightly, her voice soft but edged with curiosity. She disappeared right after the tour ended. Everyone's been asking, but you, she gestured delicately, you never did. Jungkook's eyes flicked to the camera, then to TAEHYUNG sitting on his left, whose expression had subtly changed, shoulders stiffened, jaw tight. On his other side, JIMIN sat motionless, but his eyes had narrowed, a storm gathering behind them. He wasn't breathing either. For a moment, Jungkook's voice cracked, a mere syllable escaped, strangled and unintelligible. Then silence reclaimed him. The producer behind the glass window reached for the mute switch, panicked, but before she could press it, TAEHYUNG suddenly leaned forward, voice calm and steady. Let's not do this here. It wasn't a request, it was a warning. But the tension didn't dissipate. In fact, it multiplied. Because now, it wasn't just Jungkook the audience was watching, it was JIMIN. His laugh cut through the room, sharp and unexpected. Oh, come on, Tae, JIMIN said, teeth flashing beneath a smile that didn't reach his eyes. We're already here! Live! Millions watching! Don't you think he should answer? Jungkook's hands trembled slightly. He wasn't looking at either of them now. His eyes were downcast, lost in a memory no one could see but everyone could feel pulsing in the air. The studio smelled faintly of ozone and coffee. Someone had spilled an Americano in the corner hours ago, and the scent had never left. The hum of the lights above seemed louder than usual, vibrating against the walls like nerves stretched too thin. Reina cleared her throat, unsure whether to proceed. But JIMIN was on his feet now. Why don't you tell them what really happened after the Tokyo show? He asked, voice tight and rising. Since no one else will. TAEHYUNG's chair scraped back with a loud screech as he stood too, facing JIMIN with a gaze full of quiet threat. JIMIN. Don't JIMIN me, he snapped, finger pointed now not at TAEHYUNG, but at Jungkook. You're not the one who had to drag him out of that hotel room. You didn't see what he did to himself. The words slammed into the room like a punch. Jungkook finally looked up. His eyes were glassy, but his jaw was set. Stop, he said, barely a whisper. But JIMIN wasn't done. You think they're just going to forget? That you can smile and sing and dance and no one will care what happened to her? That she's just a footnote now? TAEHYUNG reached out, a hand landing firmly on JIMIN's chest, pushing him back, but not hard, just enough to create space between them. She's not here, TAEHYUNG said. She hasn't been for a long time. And that was when Jungkook finally spoke clearly, steadily. I saw her. The room went still. JIMIN froze. TAEHYUNG's hand lowered. I saw her, Jungkook repeated, voice hollow. Last month, in Busan. No one moved. She didn't say a word, just stared, like she didn't know who I was, but it was her. JIMIN's breath caught in his throat. She's not dead. The silence after that was no longer tensate, was heavy, grief-laden, as if the air itself had weight. Reina finally spoke, her voice cracked with disbelief. You're saying she's alive? Jungkook nodded slowly, eyes distant. And she doesn't remember me. Lights flickered slightly overhead, casting a brief shimmer across the glass windows. The hum in the room grew louder as if something, somewhere, had just shifted. Something real. And something dangerous. You saw her? TAEHYUNG's voice cut through the static of silence, low and disbelieving. The microphones were still hot, the cameras still rolling, but all of it felt far away, just noise. What mattered now was the look on Jungkook's face. The tremble not just in his voice, but in his entire being, like a man who'd seen a ghost and survived only halfway. Jimin sat back down slowly, the fire in his eyes cooling just slightly into something more dangerous. Calculation. His tongue pressed against the inside of his cheek as he stared at Jungkook. "You saw her last month," he repeated, mocking incredulity edging his tone. "And you didn't say a damn word to either of us?" Jungkook couldn't look at him. Not yet. His hands fidgeted in his lap, the veins on his forearms tense and bulging. "I wasn't sure it was her." "Bullshit!" Jimin snapped. Jimin TAEHYUNG warned again, but this time his voice lacked its former conviction. He wasn't defending Jungkook anymore, he was trying to understand. Jungkook, the one who used to sleep with the lights on after she disappeared. Jungkook, who had once punched a mirror so hard in the middle of rehearsal they'd had to cancel the rest of the shoot. Jungkook, who'd written 7 unreleased songs about a girl whose name none of them dared say aloud anymore. Jungkook finally looked up, eyes meeting Jimin's. And that was when the fury in Jimin's face cracked into something else. Horror, hurt, maybe even betrayal. She was standing across the street from the cafe in Hyundai, wearing that red scarf, Jungkook said, voice dry and far away. The same one she wore the night she left. Taehyung sat back, a hand moving up to rub his temple. He couldn't process this, the red scarf. That was impossible. "She didn't look lost," Jungkook continued. "Just empty, like someone erased her soul." Jimin exhaled sharply and stood again, backing away from the table. No, I don't buy this. She's gone. We buried her, for F-PA's sake. We buried her absence. Jungkook cut in, voice sharper now. There was no body, just her phone, her shoes, and that message. That message, the one burned into all their memories like a scar that would never fully heal. "Don't look for me." Silence returned, thick and choking. Even the live chat on the monitor screen had frozen, the stream buffer overloaded with millions of viewers collectively holding their breath. And then Reina, the host, did something no one expected. She leaned forward and whispered, "Did she say your name?" Jungkook looked at her. "She didn't say anything. She just looked at me like I was. Noise." That word hung between them. Noise. And then, like a gunshot breaking through fog, Taehyung slammed his hand against the table. "Why the hell didn't you follow her?" Jungkook's face twisted. "You think I didn't try?" She disappeared into the crowd. 1 minute she was there, the next gone, like she always does. Jimin's hands were shaking now. Not from rage, but something colder. Memory. The kind that rots from the inside out. "You should have told us," he said, quieter this time. "I was going to. Jungkook stopped. His voice cracked. "I didn't know what it meant." Taehyung was pacing now, fingers dragging through his hair, breath ragged. "If she's alive, we need to find her, but we do this quietly." Jimin laughed again, this time humorless. "You think there's anything quiet about this anymore? You just told the whole world, Jungkook!" And he had. The camera lights still glowed red. Reina's team in the booth scrambled, talking over each other, trying to assess whether to cut the stream, issue a retraction, or double down and milk the chaos. But before anyone could make a decision, the feed froze and then blacked out. "What happened?" Reina asked, pulling off her headphones. "They cut us," someone muttered behind the glass. "We're off air." "No," Jimin said, already grabbing his coat. "We're not done here." "Where are you going?" Taehyung called after him. To prove he's lying, Jimin shot back without turning around. But Jungkook rose too. "I'm not." "Then come with me," Jimin challenged. Jungkook stared at him for a beat, then nodded. They left the studio together, 2 figures walking into the heat of the Seoul night, chased by cameras, whispers, and a past that refused to stay buried. The alley behind the cafe in Hyundai smelled like seawater and stale cigarettes. It hadn't changed in months. Neither had the neon sign that buzzed above the entrance, flickering the same way it had the night she vanished. The waitress behind the counter still wore her hair in that messy ponytail, chewing gum and scrolling her phone like the world hadn't just cracked open on a podcast. "This is where I saw her," Jungkook said, pointing to a spot across the street. Jimin crossed his arms, squinting. "You're sure?" Jungkook didn't answer. He just stepped into the road and stood there for a long moment, as if trying to recreate the scene. His muscles were coiled, his eyes searching. "Did she look scared?" Jimin asked. "No." "Did she look like she wanted to come back?" "No," Jungkook said again, more firmly this time. "She looked like she didn't know who I was, like my face was a blank page." Jimin's jaw clenched. "Or maybe she does know, and she's choosing not to come back." "That's not her," Jungkook said, almost to himself. "You sure?" Jimin stepped closer. "Because if you're wrong, if you're dragging us through this again..." Jungkook suddenly turned, his voice low and furious. "I know what I saw, and I know how I felt." They stared at each other, breaths coming short and fast. "Then we need to find her," Jimin said, "and get answers, real ones." Behind them, a voice said, "You won't like the truth." They spun. Taehyung stood by the alley wall, holding up his phone. On the screen was a paused video-grainy surveillance cam footage. "You weren't the only one who saw her," he said. He hit play. The video showed a woman in a red scarf walking past the cafe. She paused, looked up, then turned and vanished into an alley with a man following behind her. But it wasn't just any man. It was someone they knew. Someone who had been missing too. Namjoon. Jungkook staggered back, mouth parting in disbelief. "Impossible." "I thought he went off-grid," Jimin whispered. "Disappeared completely." Taehyung looked up from the screen. "What if he found her first?" No one spoke. Because the implication was clear now. She hadn't just vanished. She had been taken, or worse, she had run to someone else. Someone they trusted. Someone who might not be the person they remembered at all. And whatever game they were caught in, it had just begun again. Only this time, the pieces were already moving, and not one of them was in control anymore. You said? Lanjutkan episode selanjutnya dengan episode yang lebih panjang, 10.000 kata atau lebih banyak perkapan panas, seru tegang, kontroversial, kejutan dan emosional, dan berikan saya narasi saja dalam bahasa Inggris tanpa menggunakan poin-poin. ChatGPT said. Title, Jungkook stutters in the middle of a podcast when asked this question, but when Taehyung interrupts, Jimin goes wild. Episode 3. You're telling me Namjoon was there with her? Jimin's voice cracked like lightning against asphalt as he pointed at Taehyung's phone, the frozen image flickering under the harsh glow of the streetlight. The grainy still of a tall, shadowed figure following the woman in the red scarf looked unreal like a bad dream filmed on CCTV. But there was no mistaking that frame, that stride, that profile. It was Namjoon. The same Namjoon who hadn't answered a call, text, or email in 9 months. The same Namjoon who walked out of their lives without a single goodbye. The air between the three of them turned to glass fragile, thin, and about to break. Taehyung stared straight ahead, unblinking. His fingers curled tightly around the phone, knuckles pale. I got this from an old contact in Busan PD. She didn't even know what she was sending. Me just thought it looked familiar. I wasn't sure until you said it was her. Jungkook took 2 steps back, hand covering his mouth. Why would he follow her? Jimin was already shaking his head, heart pounding in his chest. No, this doesn't make sense. If he found her, if he was with her, then why did he disappear too? Taehyung replied without looking at him. Maybe he didn't disappear. Maybe he was made to. The silence that followed wasn't quiet, it throbbed. It screamed. It left them all exposed under the humid Busan night, with their fears suddenly very, very real. Where did the footage end? Jungkook asked hoarsely. There's more. They piled into the back of Taehyung's SUV, the windows dark and the interior dead silent except for the occasional buzz of passing traffic. He connected his phone to the dashboard screen, tapped through files, and then played the rest. The alley on the footage was narrow and poorly lit. The woman turned once to look behind her right before stepping into the shadows. A few seconds later, Namjoon entered the frame. He slowed down, reached into his coat. The video caught only a flash of something metallic before he disappeared into the alley after her. 37 seconds passed. Then, a figure staggered back out. But it wasn't the woman. It was Namjoon. Blood on his collar, a limp in his step, his face pale and hollow. He reached for the wall to steady himself, glanced toward the street, and then the feed cut out. Jungkook's voice broke through the heavy stillness. She heard him. Jimin blinked hard. Or someone else was waiting. No, TAEHYUNG said quietly. Look at his face. That wasn't shock. That was guilt. Jimin leaned forward, voice brittle. We need to find that alley. They did. The three of them returned on foot hours later, guided by the timestamp and location metadata. The alley had changed, new graffiti covered the walls, and the old dumpsters had been moved, but there was a rust-colored stain near the drain that hadn't quite washed away with the summer rains. Jungkook crouched beside it, eyes tracing the ground. He wasn't breathing normally. Every inch of him was wired with tension. She was here, he whispered. I can feel it. TAEHYUNG lit a cigarette, something he hadn't done in years. She left no trace, no DNA, not even on the cameras. Someone cleaned this. Or she did it herself, Jimin muttered. She was always 3 steps ahead. Jungkook stood. You still think she ran away on purpose? Jimin's eyes flared. I know she did. She wouldn't just leave. She did, Jimin snapped. She left all of us. You, me, TAEHYUNG, Namjoon. Don't romanticize it. You don't know what she was running from. Jungkook's voice rose like a scream shoved down his throat. You think it was about us? You think everything's about you? I think she knew exactly what she was doing, Jimin said icily. And I think you're still hoping she's the girl you fell in love with 3 years ago. Don't, Jungkook said through gritted teeth. Don't talk like you know anything about that. You wrote her a whole F. Ing album and never released it. Jimin fired back, stepping closer. You want to tell me that wasn't about holding on to something that doesn't exist anymore? TAEHYUNG stepped between them, arms out. Enough, both of you! They stood there, Jimin and Jungkook, chests heaving, eyes wild, like 2 magnets pulling at opposite poles, but forever stuck in orbit around the same pain. She's not dead, Jungkook said, quieter now, and if Namjoon found her, then maybe he knows why she left. TAEHYUNG looked up from his phone, eyes suddenly alert. We might not need to look far. A ping on his screen revealed a new email. No subject line, no sender name, just a video attachment, time-stamped 12 minutes ago. He opened it. The footage was shot in an abandoned train station. Namjoon sat alone on a bench, blood still dried into his shirt. He looked up at the camera with hollow eyes and spoke one word. Stop. Then, the video ended. They all stared at the screen, stunned. Where the hell is he? Jimin asked. No idea, TAEHYUNG said. But someone's watching us. Jungkook took the phone and replayed the video. This time, he noticed something different. There was a mural behind Namjoon's crumbling wall with a half-faded painting of a dragon swallowing its tail. I know that place, Jungkook said. It's near the tracks in Daegu. We shot a music video there 4 years ago. It was shut down after that. Jimin stared at him. You're sure? I remember the dragon. They were on the road an hour later. The drive was long, the silence heavy. Jungkook watched the landscape blur past the windows while TAEHYUNG kept his eyes on the GPS. Jimin leaned against the door, head resting on the glass. Not asleep, but not awake either. Do you remember when she used to hum that melody before every show? Jungkook asked softly, breaking the silence. TAEHYUNG nodded once, always in a different key. She said she never wanted the same moment twice, Jungkook added. Every performance had to be born new. Jimin didn't open his eyes, but he replied, she lied about other things too. The car fell silent again. When they reached the train station, it was nearly 3 a.m. The building was skeletal, just rusted rails and graffiti-covered concrete under a sickle moon. Crickets chirped in the weeds growing through the cracks. They walked in slowly. The dragon mural was still there, half peeled, faded and chipped, but unmistakable. There was no sign of Namjoon, but there was a sound. A soft scraping from beneath the platform. Jungkook jumped down onto the tracks, his boots crunching gravel. He followed the noise to an old maintenance hatch, rusted but unlocked. Inside, the darkness was total. Then a light flickered on. It wasn't theirs. It was a candle. 1, then 3, then 7. They followed the flickering glow down a narrow tunnel until it opened into a room lined with mirrors, dozens of them, all cracked, all facing inward. And in the center of the room, a notebook. Jungkook stepped forward. His hands trembled as he picked it up. On the cover was her handwriting. To the ones who looked for me. He opened the first page. I wasn't taken. I chose this. Jimin whispered a curse behind him. TAEHYUNG leaned in, eyes wide. There were pages upon pages, maps, names, symbols, messages scratched in haste like she'd written them between sprints and hiding places. But the final page chilled them to their bones. It was a photo. Namjoon, tied to a chair, gagged. Hair eyes behind him, cold, distant. And a caption in red ink. He knew, and he lied to you. Jungkook staggered back. Jimin turned and punched the wall with a shout of rage. TAEHYUNG stared at the photo and said, almost to himself, we're not chasing a missing person anymore. She's not lost, Jungkook added hollowly. She's running something. And somewhere out there she was watching and waiting. The sound of metal dragging across concrete echoed through the underground chamber long after the last page of the notebook had been read. The mirrors still loomed around them, tall and fractured, multiplying their reflections into distorted ghosts that blinked and shifted with every tremor of candlelight. Jungkook held the photograph in both hands like it was a living thing that might bite him. TAEHYUNG didn't speak. JIMIN paced like a caged animal, fists clenching and unclenching as if every breath he took threatened to turn into a scream. The girl they loved, the one they buried without a body, the one whose memory had shaped their songs, their silence, their guilt. She was alive, and not just alive, but watching, writing, plotting. Jimin finally stopped pacing. His voice came out hoarse, ragged. She's using him. Jungkook didn't answer. He was still staring at Namjoon's face in the photo, eyes wide and frightened behind the gag. Blood on his shirt, rope marks at his wrists, and behind him, her. The red scarf around her neck like a noose she controlled. TAEHYUNG spoke softly, but his words hit like stone. This isn't just her running anymore. She planned it, Jimin growled. Every step. She knew we'd come. She left that notebook like bait. She wants something, TAEHYUNG said. She wants us, Jungkook finally whispered. His voice trembled, but there was no hesitation in the words. Not to save her, not to help. She wants us to see what she's become. He looked up finally at the others. His eyes were different now, no longer wide with disbelief. They had narrowed with purpose. I think she wants to hurt us. The sentence settled in the room like poison gas. Jimin was already shaking his head. No, she wouldn't. She tied Namjoon to a chair, Jimin, TAEHYUNG said flatly. Took a photo, sent it to us, wrote that he lied. You think this is a game? Jimin turned to Jungkook, desperate. You loved her. You still do. You of all people. That's exactly why I see it, Jungkook cut in. She's not who she was, and maybe she never was. He moved to the mirror closest to him and stared at his own reflection. It stared back, cracked and warped. Maybe we were all in love with an illusion. From behind them, a sharp hiss filled the chamber. Gas. Something had been triggered. The candlelight flickered violently, then extinguished all at once. They were plunged into darkness. Jimin shouted her name. Jungkook grabbed for TAEHYUNG's arm. A flash of red light suddenly illuminated the ceiling. A timer. A countdown. They had 90 seconds. No words were exchanged now. They ran scrambling through the narrow corridor, tripping on roots, brushing against damp stone. TAEHYUNG found the hatch and yanked it open, the three of them spilling onto the train tracks just as an explosion ripped through the chamber behind them. The fire didn't follow them, but the shockwave did. It hurled them forward, scraped and bruised. They lay on the gravel, panting, coughing, barely alive. "She could have killed us," JIMIN gasped, voice cracking. "But she didn't," Jungkook said through clenched teeth. That was a message. TAEHYUNG sat up slowly, blood trickling down his temple. "She's testing us. She's playing us," JIMIN spat. Jungkook's voice was ice. "And I'm done playing." They got back to Seoul before dawn. None of them spoke in the car. Not until they reached Jungkook's studio, a concrete fortress buried 2 floors below a building with no signage and a code-locked elevator. Inside, it smelled like memory. Leather, incense, dust, and echoes of unreleased songs. He sat at the mixing board, booted the system, and pulled up a folder titled E. JIMIN recognized it. He had seen it once, years ago, during the night Jungkook drank until he couldn't walk. He'd begged him to delete it then. Jungkook hadn't listened. The folder contained everything: lyrics, voice notes, phone recordings, one labeled simply, "Final call, 1:16 a.m. Jungkook pressed play. Her voice came through the speaker's faint, tired, whispering. "If you're hearing this, it means I've failed, or I've won. I don't know anymore. Just know that none of this is what you think. Not the music, not the friendship, not love. None of it was mine. It was borrowed. And the price was never optional." She paused. "I'm going away now. You won't find me unless I want to be found. Don't come after me. If you do, you'll see things you can't unsee." The recording ended. No one moved. Then Jungkook turned to them. "I want to see." JIMIN looked at him like he didn't recognize the person in front of him. "Even if it breaks you?" "It already did," Jungkook said. They stayed in the studio for 3 days, working around the clock, tracking her past digital trail, dissecting the notebook, following every breadcrumb. TAEHYUNG called in old favors from hacker friends, while JIMIN made contact with Namjoon's estranged brother, who hadn't heard from him since April. Jungkook barely slept. His voice grew hoarser, his skin paler. But his eyes burned with a feverish determination that unnerved even TAEHYUNG. Then finally, they found it. A private server, hidden behind a shell company, password locked. Only one clue matched. A lyric. From a song she wrote but never sang. "Where the moon doesn't blink and the stars stay blind." Jungkook typed it in. The server opened. Files flooded the screen. Surveillance footage, audio logs, correspondence between unknown parties, and at the center of Interr. She had been working for them. Not a company, not a government, something older, deeper. A group that used artists like weapons, lyrics as codes, performances as transmissions. "Jesus Christ," TAEHYUNG whispered. "She wasn't running away from us. She was running from them," JIMIN finished. But Jungkook kept scrolling deeper and deeper until he found the last file. A live feed. It flickered, stabilized. Namjoon in a chair again, still bound. But this time, the room was different. Brighter. And she was there, standing behind him. She looked straight into the camera. And she smiled. Then she spoke. "You found me." Jungkook's heart stopped. "You shouldn't have." The feed cut to black. JIMIN staggered back, pressing a hand to his mouth. "She's gone." "No," Jungkook said, eyes locked on the blank screen. "She's waiting." TAEHYUNG whispered. "For what?" Jungkook turned to them both. "For us to choose." "What choice?" But Jungkook already knew. She didn't want to be rescued. She didn't want to be forgiven. She wanted to show them the truth, what she'd become, what they'd helped create. And now she had set the stage. And they were already on it. Lights on. No script. Only truth. And it was going to hurt. The screen was still black. Her face, those haunting eyes, and that calm, devastating smile still lingered in their minds long after the feed had cut. No one moved. The silence stretched, dense and suffocating, swallowing the air in the studio until even breathing felt like a betrayal. Jungkook sat frozen in front of the monitor, his fingers twitching slightly over the keyboard as though hoping a single keystroke would undo everything they'd just seen. Jimin stood in the corner, one hand on the wall like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. TAEHYUNG hadn't moved at all. He stared at the screen like it might still blink back to life and show them the ending, because that wasn't the end, was it? Jungkook finally broke the silence. His voice was low and even, but there was something sharp underneath. She wants us to come. She said we shouldn't have found her, TAEHYUNG said. She knew we would, Jimin snapped. She set the whole damn thing up. You think that video was a mistake? You think the notebook was an accident? She's been pulling strings since the day she disappeared. Not strings, Jungkook said quietly. Threads. Threads she wants us to follow. She's insane, Jimin said, his voice rising. She's dangerous. She was always dangerous, TAEHYUNG murmured, almost like it hurt to say. Jungkook's eyes didn't leave the monitor. She's not asking us to save her. Jimin turned. So what, Jungkook? You're gonna walk into whatever that was? That room? She had Namjoon tied to a F-ing chair. She also let us see him, Jungkook shot back. She's not hiding anymore. She's orchestrating. Jimin scoffed bitterly. Jesus, you still love her. Jungkook didn't deny it. He just stood up. I don't know if I love her or the memory of her, but I have to know which one is real. He turned to them both. I'm going, with or without you. The decision was made. TAEHYUNG closed his eyes for a moment, then nodded. We finished this. Jimin hesitated. Then, after a long breath, he walked toward them. If we're doing this, we do it on our terms. They prepared quietly. Each of them had their own ritual. Jungkook pulled out the ring she'd once left on his mic, stand still cold, still gold, still heavy. TAEHYUNG tucked an old photograph into his jacket, the five of them on tour, laughing in a way none of them had done in years. Jimin loaded a USB drive with every unreleased track she'd written, each one encrypted with subtle clues. She wanted them to follow the trail. But this time, they would arrive not as broken men, not as mourners, but as the final players in the game she had built. The address was embedded in the metadata of the server's last video, an abandoned airstrip outside Jeon, government-owned once, now scrubbed from every official registry. They arrived just past dusk. The runway was cracked and overtaken by weeds, the control tower a silent sentinel in the distance. A single hangar remained intact, massive, dark, and yawning open like the mouth of a cave. They approached slowly, every instinct in their bodies screaming to turn back. Inside the hangar, lights flickered on. Not electric, stayed lights.